So as I just stated, that we are reviewing, we're going over reviewing the closing docs, the purchase and sale agreement, and use and occupancy agreement. And that's a huge amount of information. I could sit here for 3 hours and talk about that. So I just wanted to get an idea from this group, what's specific of anything of that, or is there one thing you really want to key in on? Like Carla, we could talk the next hour about use and occupancies and we'd be happy, or, you know, something like that. What questions do you guys have so that I can write them down so I make sure that I touch upon them and that they naturally lead into one another. So does anyone have anything for me?
The use and occupancy was one. What was the other one the other day on the board? The thing you did with the social realtors.
Oh, we had talked about all sorts
the
of
end.
things.
There was a couple things in the end. I'm trying to remember.
We talked a lot about the appraisal. We talked a lot about appraisal.
You talked about, because I just started watching that because I couldn't join live, but I'm up to the point where you're suggesting that as a listing agent to make sure the sellers do have an attorney, because you need that now in this type of environment, and to order title review right away.
So right. So one of Charles Heed was asking about that. Like, how can we ensure for buyers that they're not going to have, like, you know, last minute title issues? And I said, there's no way that you can, because of multiple reasons. First of all, you're not going to be able to get title back. You know, when a property goes live on Thursday or Friday and offers are due on Monday or Tuesday, you're not going to be able to get a title back on that, first of all. So really, if the seller wants to be able to make sure that they're going to be able to sell, there's a cost associated with it. It's, you know, usually $200 to $250. That, you know, before you list the house or when you're ready to list the house, you go ahead and you pull title at that time. You ask the seller's attorney to get a full title rundown on it. And that way we can at least start to identify what could potentially be a title issue, what needs to be cleared up. The thing that we started to talk about, you know, so anyone who didn't see the panel, it was Brad Mahoney from Brad Mahoney Law, it was Mark Stiles from Stiles Law, it was Mike Baird from Kellum and Kellum, and it was me. And so the four of us, you know, just kind of talking about what our practices were, what we thought was best practice, you know, what's going on in the industry. And, you know, the problem with that is, though, and I'm dealing with, you know, one of Bob Gill's deals right now, like, we came forward and we said, here's the title issue. This is how we would resolve it. And here's our title company that says yes. And the buyer side came back and said, our title company doesn't agree that that's how it should be cleared up. And we don't even think that you have the power to do that. So then we started pitting the title companies against each other. And then on our side, we got 2 title companies to agree. And then one of the title companies kind of got the other attorney's title company to kind of say, oh, I can see that. Okay, maybe, you know. So even when you have a title back, how we're going to resolve it or what we think is acceptable could still be up for question, but at least right off the bat, we know there's a problem. Like, we know, and we can start getting ahead of it. Yeah. So that would be, you know, the suggestion. I know everybody's looking to kind of save a penny, but if you think that you're going to try to buy and sell on the same day, or it's really important because you've already got something under agreement in Florida or something, that might be an expense that's short money up front to make sure that you don't have an extra month of carrying costs or double carrying costs. You know, so it's an idea to handle. I mean, most of us from a seller standpoint, you know, when I get a deal in, when I'm looking up the deed, I do a quick search on that on that seller and on that property, just to see, do I see any outstanding, like an order of conditions or a tax taking, or do I see something funky, like, why is this name here and I'm not seeing this here? So I can kind of dig up, but that's just going to be current owner. Which is good, because the current owner is usually the problem that can't have the title insurance covered over, but that still doesn't include the bankruptcy court, the family and probate court. So that's only doing what we can find at the registry of deeds. And sometimes family and probate, specifically more so than bankruptcy, comes in and throws another, you know, hook in it, being like, okay, wait, the probate never got closed out, or this heir never did XYZ. So again, it could potentially be good practice in this market. I don't know that it's always necessary, because just like everything else, I mean, titles, we like to say that they're going to be back in 5 days, but like everybody else, appraisals are taking 3 weeks. Sometimes our titles, especially in certain areas, you know, you kind of go out to Worcester County where there's a lot more big subdivisions and everything. Our title exam might be 500-700 pages. That just takes a lot of time to call to get to us. And then once we get it, we're looking through it. So it's like, even when we get title back, then you've still got to review it, make sure that there's nothing in there. So it's not, quick and easy. Boston condos or like Weymouth Port that's constantly being turned over every couple of years, that's actually not so bad because everything's been vetted so many times that it's actually, even though it's a huge amount of back information, it's usually more unit specific than the entire complex. So it really just depends.
Well, the best one was, well, my mother bought the house in 1954, so that's it, done. There's your 50 years, we're all set. So.
Right, exactly. So it's two bona fide owners. So meaning that you purchased it for consideration, not just nominal consideration. So anytime that you see a deed into a trust or into a family member or in between two spouses or in and out of an LLC or a trust or anything that says for nominal consideration of $1, $100, sometimes the old ones will say love and consideration. That's not considered. So if it's been in your family and it hasn't sold for what we would say roughly is fair market value. If fair market value is 400 and you sold it to your brother for 350, that's still fair market value. But it wasn't, you sold it for $10,000. So if it has been in your family a really long time, we have to go back at least one more owner or at least 50 years. So if your family's owned it for 60 years, that does not consider, it's at least 50 years and two owners or whichever, it is longer. So that's how sometimes we end up getting titles that we're going back to the 1800s. And it's like, well, why are we talking about horse paths? Because it's been in someone's family for so long. And a lot of times that is where the big title issues come up, believe it or not, because all these times that it's been conveyed, no one's done a title search. Because I'm just, it's almost like a hand-me-down. No one's like finding out if the jeans are in good condition. If you're just passing them down, like no big deal. But, you might have missing discharges. You might have death certificates that haven't been recorded. You might have missing heirs. You might have estate tax affidavits that are still outstanding. You might have a slew of things because no one's ever really done that title search. So that's why the longer you've owned the property, the more I go, oh boy, buckle up.
That's interesting. And
Is title search necessary?
Absolutely. Yeah.
For every property.
So
I got it. Hey, sorry, Carla. I ended up in land court for almost 2 years because you guys did your due diligence. David Jaime at Lieberman Law and did a title search on a paper road, and that ended up belonging to a railroad company. So it really, really, thank God that you guys did what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. So anytime a lender takes out a loan, they're part of like what I get is the title request, and the title request is they need 50 years or two owners. So yes, it's 100% required. Is it required on a cash deal? Nope. You can buy whatever you want and whatever encumbrances come. The potential problem is you're taking it warts and all. So if there's an outstanding mortgage that never gets paid, well, when you go to sell, you might have to pay off that mortgage because you didn't do a title search. And it comes down to as well, people will say, well, you just did a title search. Why do I need title insurance? Well, I can have clear record marketable title the day of closing, but a perfect example happened a ton, and we're still dealing with the fallout on a regular basis, is the day that you close, if your seller had a mortgage, well, in the state of Massachusetts, the lending institution that was the holder of the mortgage has 30 days to send to either the registry of deeds or the closing attorney the discharge for us to get to record. So they have 30 days to send it. So 37 days or something like that for it to get to record. Well, if we reach out and are like, hey, it's been 30 days, it's not on record, we haven't received a copy, and they don't send it, and they don't send it, and they don't send it, or what happened during the financial crash, they just go out of business, and there's no successor of interest, there's no one to ever give a discharge. That's the number one way that you're going to end up in land court with a quiet title action, is because we had one just recently. Massachusetts attorneys are only required to keep our records for 10 years. So if anything's past 10 years and you come to me and say, hey, do you have that HUD or closing disclosure, but 10 years, it would still be a HUD. And do you have proof of the payoff of this mortgage, proof of the checks or anything else like that? If it's over 10 years, I'm not required to have it. So the number one way that you can start to get around it is you can show people, here's the HUD, here's the check, it was cashed, everything else like that. We're showing you that it was paid off. Then along with that, when you have that proof, The attorney who handled the closing writes a 5B affidavit that you record at the registry of deeds stating, I was the attorney in charge of this. I swear under pains and penalties of perjury, it was paid off. You can rely on this. I'll take an indemnification and undertaking for any title insurance company that ever wants additional proof, blah, 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 blah. Well, not only was it past 10 years so that the company didn't have that information, the attorney who had done the closing was deceased. So we had no place to go. So granted, did we think that this mortgage had probably been paid off? Of course we did. But the rule from a real estate bar association, the REBA standard, is it's 30, it's either, oh gosh, I'm gonna mess this up. It's either the face of the note, so it's 30 years, or if there's no end date in the note, it's 30 years plus 5 years. Don't hold me to that. I need to double check that. It's something I get messed up all the time. But it's like right in there. I know which REBA standard it is. I could get my
sounds right. Yeah, I had another attorney tell me the same thing. So
yeah. So the thing is, like, if you took it out in, like, 1997, chances are, it was a let's say it was a, it was a home equity line, and the home equity lines are usually only good for, like 10 years, and then you have to start paying back. Like, someone would have come and foreclosed on you at this point if you didn't pay it off. So, like, we assume it was paid off. Or, sometimes it'll be like a little amount. It was like $30,000 loan or something like that, but we don't know for sure. So we can't just assume that it was paid off. We still need some sort of proof. So this is another way that we end up, in land court. So something as simple as a discharge on the day of closing that I'm saying you're good to go, we could end up with a title issue. With all of those foreclosure issues that we had, that the Ibanez issue came up and everything else like that, the Bank of America and, the federal government invalidated tens of thousands of foreclosures. All of a sudden, closing date, you had clean title. Government comes in and says, nope. Or the laws change. When the UPC, the Uniform Probate Code, came in 2012 into 2013, we had the old rules and the new rules, and there was a time period of, like, no man's land of what was going on. So there's lots of ways that I can tell you on closing date, definitively, swear on the whatever, that you have clean title, and then sometime in the future, you don't have clean title. And that's nothing to do with what the attorney who did your closing did or didn't do. It's that there's been a change of circumstances, or someone else after closing didn't do their job. Another big one that comes up, and I do not know why the municipalities do this. So we get the municipal lien certificate. So as a closing attorney, we get the municipal lien certificate. It'll say, have the taxes been paid? Is there any outstanding water, sewer, anything else like that? Well, there's, again, a no man's land period of time where the municipal lien certificate may say that there's nothing outstanding. Well, what's happened is it's fallen off the municipal lien certificate and it's going into collections, that it's going to be like a taking. But there's no documentation that we can get from the town or city stating, oh, there's this outstanding. So what'll happen is buyer will buy, municipal lien certificate said nothing was due. We had a clean municipal lien certificate. And then sometime maybe like 4 months later, all of a sudden they get this bill and they're like, hey, this amount is due. And they're like, what are you talking about? And we're scrambling and we're like, whoever told us this, and they don't say, like, on the municipal lien certificate, this amount is being, sent to collections or anything else like that. They just remove it. So that's another way that, like, a title issue can come up. I mean, so there's things that can happen even if everyone's working really hard to do their due diligence and everything else like that. But that's actually not why we're here today. So thank you. Although the municipal lien certificate is a closing doc, so I kind of felt like I wasn't too off topic. Okay, so Jim, you want to talk about use and occupancies. Anyone else have something that they're specifically about, like, why are the closing docs this, or when do we get them late, or anything else like that? I'll make sure that I bring it up. Okay, so we'll start with use and occupancy agreements. So use and occupancy agreements, what are they? Why do we do them? And what should be contained in them? So if you ask attorneys, we don't like use and occupancy agreements. They're a big mess as to who's responsible, who's carrying insurance, did you carry insurance, whose fault was it, was it negligence, did we not know about it? We also understand that they're a necessary evil. Then what we're trying to do is craft something that effectuates that there's going to be a use and occupancy, but then we're seriously trying to protect our clients. So what is a use and occupancy? A use and occupancy, it's either the seller is staying after the closing date for a certain period of time, or the buyer is moving in and taking possession prior to the closing date. So what does that look like? So a lot of times in the use and occupancy, if the buyer is taking possession early, we want to know a couple things, or at least from the seller's attorney standpoint, what I want to know is, has the commitment date already passed? Or we know that they are committed to getting this loan. So usually we don't let them move in super duper early. It's maybe like a week before closing or something like that. I also like to say that the minute that the buyer takes possession, they're taking possession as is. So if they move in and then they're like, oh, hey, the hot water isn't working, or something like that, it's basically you're having your walkthrough as if you would on closing date. And then as of that date, it's your responsibility. Now, what becomes difficult is renter's insurance versus homeowner's insurance is different. So if that hot water tank goes, or the tub starts leaking and water is pouring through your kitchen because of, then the question becomes, well, whose responsibility should that be? Well, from a seller standpoint, it was, but for you moving in, we don't know what you did to the place. Now, granted, yeah, you didn't cause the hot water tank to go, but you were using the hot water tank, and actually the hot water tank may not have gone had someone not been using it for 10 days. So no, this becomes your problem. Well, of course, the buyers want to come back and say, not my problem. I don't own this house. What are you talking about? I'm not fixing this. It's additional layer of, if they waive their inspection and now they get into the property and they start noticing things and they're like, well, I didn't know about that. No one disclosed this to me. What's going on here? So it really opens up for a lot of potential like disagreements. That's really what it is. And I mean, I try to draft a very tight use and occupancy agreement that in no uncertain terms, it's as if, buyer, you have bought this house. You can't come back, complain about a single thing. Anything that breaks, that's on you. Like, tree falls on the house. Okay, this is a perfect example. Tree falls on the house. Buyer doesn't own the house yet. So does buyer still have to buy the house? Well, they're no longer able to buy the house because the house isn't there to buy. But seller's like, well, I moved along because I let you move it. Now, granted, would the tree have fallen on the house anyways? Probably. But you guys can start to see where all this gray area starts coming in, hence why attorneys don't like it. Now we move to the selling side. So, what are we doing for a seller's use and occupancy? So first things first, I'm going to say 60 days because everyone says 60 days. Loan officers like to say it's 59 days. But a use and occupancy for a buyer that's buying owner occupied and is getting an owner occupied interest rate, a use and occupancy cannot be longer than 60 days, because at closing, the buyer signs multiple documents stating that in fact they are taking an owner occupied loan. At least one of the borrowers will owner occupy within 60 days. And in fact, there's a document that first it says, these are all the terms. Yes, I'm going to owner occupy within 60 days, blah, 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 blah. And then there's a second portion that says, and if I'm lying, I'm committing a federal crime, and they make you sign underneath that. So it's actually a really big thing. So when I get these offers over that state, oh, like, buyer's willing to give seller use and occupancy for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, unlimited. I'm like, that's great that that's what you guys agreed to, but we can't agree to that. I can put a use and occupancy in place for 60 days. What you guys do after that, that is up to you. And I let my buyers know you will be signing something at closing that says you are owner occupying for 60 days. The next question becomes is, well, what is the use and occupancy fee going to be? Normally, it would be the buyer's carrying cost. So, let's just say hypothetically 31 days in a month, their mortgage is $3,100. It's $100 a day, just because that's easy math. What was that ever agreed to? When the seller said, I want to use an occupancy, was it ever agreed to that the carrying cost, which is what we also call PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And then we also say if there's a condo fee, if there's water and sewer due, this all the utilities stay in the seller's name. So it's basically like the seller's renting, but a landlord-tenant relationship has not been established. And we're very clear in the use and occupancy, the landlord-tenant relationship has not been established, because if the landlord-tenant relationship's been established, we're now into like eviction land versus you guys seller just being a squatter if they don't leave. So we need to determine, is there carrying costs, and if so, how much? The next thing needs to be, how much is the holdback agreement going to be? And I usually like to at least double, I don't always get my way, at least double what the buyer's carrying costs are going to be. Because, some attorneys want to say, oh, we'll hold back $2,000. I'm like, no, that doesn't even cover 1 month of carrying costs. Like, we want to, I usually try for 10,000. That's my first shot, unless it's a house that's like upwards towards $1 million or over. Then I try to go for 15 or 20, because a couple of reasons. So first of all, if you don't move, we need, you know, the buyer needs money to be able to get you out. So and I don't always win, my holdback agreement, I am very harsh to sellers when I represent the buyer. It basically says you have until this date to move out. Now, depending on what the use and occupancy is, if it's $100 a day, I make the day after you didn't move out that you were supposed to, I make that a penalty. So I usually say the use and occupancy agreement becomes $500 a day. And the reason I do that is normally for you to store your stuff and get a hotel room is going to be less than $500. Now, again, if we're up in like the million zone or something like that, I might say use and occupancy becomes $1,000 a day. I don't want the seller staying. I don't want them to be like, it's just as easy for me to stay there. I'll pay now $200 a day, no big deal. Do I always win that argument? No, but it is 100% meant to be a penalty against the seller if they do not move. The second thing that I try to do is it says if the seller does not move and the buyer has to start basically like eviction proceedings, although they're not really eviction proceedings, that a certain sum, you know, it might be $5,000 or it might be $2,000. Again, we're depending on the price point, is automatically, no mutual consent required, is automatically released to the buyer to start these proceedings. Because again, it's not the buyer's fault the seller didn't move out. So we want the buyer to have some money to be able to go and get these sellers out. So same with if you start staying over and it was $100 a day and now it's $500 a day, I write in there that without mutual consent and agreement, buyer automatically starts getting that money. Because why should we, you know, I mean, we all have these deposit problems that it's like, well, seller doesn't get it, buyer doesn't get it, and our office is holding $20,000. What do we do with it now? I don't want there to have to be mutual consent because the seller's never going to consent to us just starting to give away money. Another layer of that additionally is, you know, what and when does the buyer become, you know, responsible for certain things? Well, what about if there's, you know, lawn maintenance, snow removal, oil tanks, you know, anything else like that? So a lot of times what we'll do is we won't do a final water and sewer at closing. We won't do a final water read or oil reading at closing. We do all of that when the seller goes to move out because that's additional money that they should have expended. But what I do when I am representing the seller who's staying is I tell the buyers that upon the seller vacating the premise, they have 24 hours to review the property and to let me know if there are any problems with the property. Because again, I don't want the buyer moving in and 10 days later being like, hey, by the way, we found something. When the seller moves out, it becomes like a normal walkthrough. You go, you do the walkthrough, you either accept the property or you don't. You let us know immediately and we move on with our lives. Because that's something that starts to become, buyers never told us that the property is okay. It's 10 days later. Seller's like, what's going on? Why can't I get my money back? We're like, well, the buyer hasn't told us and no one's communicating with us. So what I'm constantly trying to do with these agreements, although I hate them, is not have to constantly be relying on both parties giving mutual consent in this, that, and another thing. So if the seller vacates and the buyer's been given notice and the buyer didn't get there, now granted, again, you might come tell me and be like, hey, the day that the buyer's going to move out or the seller's going to move out, the buyers are going to be away for the weekend. So I'm like, great, I'll put a new date in there. So you guys are moving out July 2nd. Buyers aren't going to be back from 4th of July weekend until the 6th. Great, you have until the 6th to do the walkthrough and then we're done with it. So that's some of the things that I have to say about use and occupancy. What questions do you guys have for me on all of those fronts? Nada? Okay.
I'm good.
If you think of anything,
Yeah.
let me know. So reviewing the closing docs. So I'm not exactly sure when they made this class what they meant by that. Is it the bank package? Is it the seller docs? You know, the closing docs a lot of times they're just that. You know, when I sit down with my buyers, I say, here are your final figures. You've seen them. We're going to go over them again. And then there's only 4 important documents. There's the deed. I'm going to make sure your name's spelled correctly. It's the property that you think that you're buying for the price that you think you're buying it at. There's the note, which is going to say, here's the property address, here's the interest rate, and here's the loan amount. Those 3 things. Here's the mortgage. Is your name spelled correctly? Are you taking out X amount of mortgage on this property? Okay, great. And then there's the homestead. Is your name spelled correctly? Are you married or unmarried? And that's it. Like, those are the important documents. So if you have a closing stack this big or this big, all the rest of it, sorry, I got a little fruit fly in here. All the rest of it is fluff. All the rest of it is saying smoke and lead and urea formaldehyde foam insulation and agreement to reapportion and that there's no money switching hands and that here's your, 1003, your loan application, and you consented for tax transcripts, and here's a bunch of tax transcripts, and you consented to your social security number being checked. Oh, and by the way, you're confirming your social security number. And it's all these different things. If it's a multifamily or a single family, there's going to be a plot plan in there. I'm going to show that to you. But really, the closing docs are the closing docs. It comes down to price, loan amount, property address, and your names are spelled correctly. And then the way you're holding tenancy, husband and wife as tenants, or spouses by tenants by the entirety, joint tenants or tenants in common. So really, although we've got all of these documents, there's just, that's the reason that we could go to a much bigger hybrid closing of we sit down. Really, the only thing from a standpoint of Massachusetts that we would have to meet in person on is the mortgage and the homestead, because both of those things, well, I guess the note, well, no, some lenders are taking the note because those have to be notarized, and we don't have a remote online notary act. We don't have a RON act. So you have to notarize those in person. I did a closing the other day that even the note was virtually signed. So really, more and more, I think some lenders are getting towards a hybrid, that you're coming in and a lot of those fluff documents that you sign, those 80 pages that you sign during your loan application, what you're doing is you're basically re-signing them, saying, yep, all these documents I signed, I'm reaffirming that, yep, this was my tax transcript, and yep, I didn't lie on my loan application, yep. So I don't know in the future how much we'll actually paper sign, but what I would say is I don't see us being completely virtual anytime in the near future. If Massachusetts was ever going to get on board with the Remote Online Notary Act, it would have been during COVID, and they never elected to do that. So I just don't see it happening. So for the foreseeable future, we will still be needing for at least some closings or some document signing. So reviewing the closing docs, really what it comes down to, for you guys as agents, if you want to, is looking at the closing costs. But I don't mean this rudely. You don't necessarily know what you're looking at because you were not privy to the preliminary closing disclosure. You were not privy to the loan estimate. So if you see loan origination fees, prepaids, and escrows, like you don't know what you're looking at, because just like when people call me up and go, can you tell me what my closing costs are going to be? I said, well, once you get your loan estimate, I can look that over and adjust. We're closing in August. You're going to have to reimburse for taxes or, this, that. I can look at the numbers, but I have no idea what your loan origination fees are. I have no idea if you have, mortgage insurance, MIP, if it's lender paid, buyer paid, is it rolled into your loan? I have no idea if there's a lender credit. I literally have no idea. I don't know what your appraisal cost is going to be. I don't know. So I can't even tell you that. I can tell you what your recording fees are going to be. I can tell you what your title insurance is going to be. I can tell you certain things like that. But loan origination fees, prepaids, and escrows, I have absolutely no idea what they would be. So I don't know what I'm looking at, which is why I say respectfully, you guys don't know what you're looking at because you haven't been privy to things. I can go back and look at what the preliminary closing or preliminary loan estimate is that the lender usually sends it to us. But basically what I'm doing is I'm going through the numbers and I'm explaining to you what they are. I'm not necessarily explaining to you how the lender got to them. And sometimes people will be like, well, why is this number this? And I'm like, I don't know. You have to talk to your loan officer. I didn't make up that number. I didn't put that number in there. They provided it to us. So reviewing the closing documents, you guys have a very limited role in that just because you wouldn't know. It really, even for me, when the lender sends me things and a buyer will say, why am I signing this? My answer is because the lender asked you to. I have one that I'm doing with right now. They provided to us in the closing package a predated from March, I think it was March 29th, 2021, a predated tax returns. So my buyer signed them at closing, and then the lender came back and said, why is this dated March 29th? And I said, well, you sent it over predated. Like, why would we cross that date out? And they were like, well, now it needs to be re-signed. And now the borrower's going, well, why am I signing something on the date I didn't actually file my taxes? And I was like, because that's what the lender's requiring. And you signed a document that said that you would sign anything post-closing within 60 days that the lender needed. And they're not very happy about it, but I'm like, where's the harm and foul? Basically what I told them is, you're not signing this stating that this is the day that you filed your taxes. You're signing it, dating it, stating, I am reaffirming that these taxes that I say I submitted, I did submit. That's what you're doing. That's why you're dating it on the closing date versus the date that you actually filed your taxes. Any questions about closing docs? Okay. Purchase and sale agreement. I believe that the purchase and sale agreement is the like end all be alpha and omega. I can't tell you how many times in a day I rely on my purchase and sale agreement. And it's one of the reasons that I don't allow, if you are a listing agent or I'm representing the buyer and a listing agent sends me the standard form, PDF, every single time I'm like, please send it to me in a Word document. Because first of all, here's what happens. Am I above printing something out, handwriting on it, scanning it back to you? No, I can do that. But first of all, it becomes a hot mess because there's no room and I'm like writing arrows and this, that, and another thing. And then ultimately someone comes back to me and goes, well, who's going to clean this up? And I was like, well, that's why I wanted it in a Word document originally. I never have any problems drafting a purchase and sale agreement as long as the selling side isn't planning on hiring an attorney. Because sometimes what happens is the listing side puts together a purchase and sale agreement to give the seller's attorney an idea of what's going on, and then the seller's attorney drafts a purchase and sale agreement and sends it to me. I don't care how it happens. I'm more than happy to do it. I don't charge my client anymore for it or anything else like that. More than happy to have a nice editable document that we can begin with. But also, sometimes it is just a matter, I know I have my phone, but I can't always print it out. Like if I'm on the road for 2 days, like I'm not near a printer to print out, and yes, do I have my Adobe PDF? Can I start to make, it just is not a clean looking document ultimately. And I would prefer something, especially because sometimes the lenders will come back and be like, the buyer and seller didn't initial every single change that was made. Well, that's a real nice area for you guys to have to go in every single time that I made a change. So I really prefer starting with a Word document. There's the standard form purchase and sale agreement, which is it's the same thing as the MAR. I think it might be the G bar. I don't remember if it's the MAR or the G bar, but I think most attorneys, we have that in Word form, and then we may have added things. So there are a lot of items that I feel, although the MAR form does a very good job at starting it, it doesn't, it's time for them to update that. Now, someone told me yesterday that I think it was MAR maybe came out with a new buyer's addendum. They told me they were going to get it to me. I was with another attorney last night and she told me that. But the perfect example of where, and it's not because I'm great, I'm not saying that, but where my buyer's addendum saved my client. So they come in a couple months ago. I said, usually the first thing I ask is, other than introducing myself, because I've never met them, is I say, how'd the final walkthrough go? And they were like, well, good, but the attic's still full of all of this like old rugs and old this and old that. And I was like, well, they need to clean that out. And the buyer's agent was like, no, they're not willing to do it. They said it was there when they first, moved in. It's not their responsibility. I was like, it doesn't matter if it was there when they moved in. They need to remove it. And we kept going back and forth, and the buyer's agent kept texting the listing agent. And so finally she said to me, she goes, well, the listing agent said that if we wanted this all removed, then that should have been discussed further beforehand. And it should be in the purchase and sale agreement. And anyone who knows me at all well, I know Steve will laugh at this. I said, 1 second, got up, came to my computer, pulled up the PDF, printed out the 1 page, circled it, highlighted it, came in. I said, please feel free to scan her that. And it said right there, it wasn't just property is going to be broom swept. It was like, it will be broom swept, including basement, attic, garage, crawl spaces, sheds, and any outside areas that would otherwise have trash, debris, or building materials. So it said it right there. The attic had to be broom swept. Like,
so do we even have to put that on our contract when we send it to you? So if we don't add that, you can actually add that in there. If we don't say broom clean.
I 100% in every single one of my contracts will say broom cleaned, unless someone comes back and is like, it's like a flipper or something that's like, no, we said we'd take it, however. Or, recently it was a hoarder's house. And I was like, Whatever's gone's gone and whatever's not gone. So if it's not going to be broom swept, you need to let me know. Otherwise, from a selling standpoint, otherwise it will 100% in my buyer's addendum, 100% every single time be in there. And it'll also say that all appliances need to be in the same working order as they were at the time of the buyer's home inspection, unless there was an offer to purchase with inspection waived, then I'll say offer to purchase. So again, I'm a big, let's flesh it out. I know that your offers only have like 2 little lines. Well, you know what? Word documents are aplenty, riders are aplenty. I say spell it out so that there's absolutely no question as to, I'm dealing with a couple right now, with, was there a meeting of the minds? When buyer said that they would give a 30-day extension if necessary if the tenant didn't move out, well, my understanding of that is as a seller, we're not paying your rate locks or anything else like that. You said right in the offer that you would give us a 30-day extension. So my answer is you should not go lock a rate until we know this tenant's moving out. The attorney on the other side is saying, I don't agree with you. Nope, that's not what we agreed to. We said we'd give you an extension. We didn't say we'd give it to you for free. And I'm like, but why are you locking a rate until we, so here we are, battling it out. Same with the use and occupancies. If it says the buyer's gonna give a use and occupancy, did we say that we were going to cover carrying costs? Was it assumed that carrying, especially in this very competitive market where sellers believe that they are entitled to everything under the sun at zero cost? These are real questions that come up. And to follow up on my story, as soon the text had been going back hot and heavy, and as soon as she sent a picture of that in the purchase and sale agreement, the text stopped. And 30 minutes later, she said, give us an hour, the attic will be clean. So again, would it have been the worst thing in the world that my clients had to, have some carpeting removed and everything else like that? No, I mean, it is what it is. This market is what it is, and it's always what it is. And at the end of the day, if it's not broom swept, are you going to hold up the closing? Same with you show up and you pull up and there's still trash on the corner, or the junket people haven't shown up yet. Are we doing a holdback agreement? And if the seller won't agree to a holdback agreement, are we not recording that day? But if we're not recording that day, you can't move in, then you're paying for the mover. So a lot of times it simply becomes a risk cost analysis. Which costs more? And who's going to blink first? Like when we come back and go, great, okay, we won't close. Well, does the seller need the money because they're purchasing the same day? Can we force them into giving us a little bit of money or doing a holdback? Or the seller's like, cool, great. Let me know when we record. I'm not doing crap about it. So I always say I can fight the good fight, but there's also times depending on the situation of the deal, the attorney or agent on the other side, I can scream into the wind all day long knowing I'm not going to get what you are asking of me. So the question becomes, are we just doing, are we just performing theater just to say, well, we tried, or are we just going to where I know we're going to end up? And that does, you guys, I'm sure, deal with the same agents sometimes. Like, which agents are going to be, good co-brokes and are going to be reasonable and everything else like that. And then the ones that are not. And in my industry, it's no different. There are some attorneys that I'm like, oh, this is going to be such a breeze. P&S is going to be done in 5 minutes. We'll do nice things. Be like, this is the last one that we negotiated. I already took it out your edits, put in my edits, da 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 da. Is this good? And we're like, thank you so much. Thanks for making it easy. And others, it's like, wow, let me just put on my armor. This is going to be battle, because some attorneys truly believe that they need to start all the way over here for the client when we all know we're going to get here. Whereas most attorneys in this industry, they're like, they're going to start here, and we're going to get here. But I don't, always, and some people will say, can we get this P&S done in a day? And I was like, tell me who the attorney is on the other side. I have absolutely no idea. Is it an attorney that only does real estate law? If it is, great, maybe. But if they only do real estate law and it's something like May 28th or May 27th, chances are they're in closings all day. So no, I may not be able to. Or if it's an attorney that's regularly in court, I may not hear back. So again, when you guys are doing these timelines, they're fantastic. And I appreciate that we're all, in sixth gear trying to get there. But at the same time, not everybody works at the same speed. Not everybody has the ability to work at the same speed. Not all lenders, not all appraisers can get things back in the same speed. So, when I'm getting in deals on June 9th and everyone's like, we're going to close on the 30th, you guys weren't all on yet, but I was having a phone call with another attorney, and she called me up and was like, what are these dates? This is insane. And I said, I told them that because what we're doing is we're taking 3 lots and we're swapping part pieces of the lots to make each lot a conforming lot. So the seller and her daughter own 3 lots, and they want to be able to have 3 conforming lots so that 3 new houses can be built. Well, one of the lots is already under agreement and was under agreement before they even started this. They have to submit new plans to the town. We only submitted the new plans to the town yesterday. The town has 3 weeks to approve the plans. So chances are they're not even going to be approved by the closing date. And so the attorney's like, what are we doing here? And I said, listen, when they first told me that they put it on the market and had an accepted offer, I said, why are we even having this conversation? We are so far out from being able to close, because as soon as the town approves these new plans, we have to go look at the plans that have been approved, and we have to go create 3 new deed descriptions. So this is not something that I'm just going to be able to be like, oh, 15 minutes, let me go create, I'm going to have to like look at these plans, do new meets and bounds, look at the surveys, everything else like that. This is not going to be a quick thing. And so she's asking me, she goes, well, once you do that, she goes, I'm going to have to pull title on all 3 of these lots to make sure that there's that the 3 lots that have now changed boundaries. And I said, yeah. She goes, well, I don't think that my client, one, was expecting to have to pay for 3 titles. And I said, I don't know what they were told. And she said, I'm not going to be able to do that if you're finding out a day or 2 before closing. And I said, listen, I've told them from the beginning, this is an unrealistic timeline. Everyone's told me I don't know what I'm talking about. Carla, you can make it happen. And I was like, I understand I'm a magician sometimes, but I can't make this happen. But no one has told anyone no except for me. So I said, if you would like to go tell everybody now in an email, this date's unrealistic, I said, I will jump right on and say, heck yeah, you're right. That's what I've been saying. But in the meantime, I've been given a date that I need to somehow to comply with, that I don't know how in Lord's name it's going to happen. But, I guess I'll wait another 2 weeks to see. Hopefully we'll get approval from the town sooner rather than later, and I'll have a little bit more time, to do the work. But to a lot of people, it doesn't seem like what we're doing in the background is important, but it is so incredibly important, because if we get it wrong, the amount of problems that it causes. If I incorrectly encumber a land with a mortgage, and I left out 10 feet or put in 10 feet, trying to get that fixed is a nightmare. And there's a lot of costs, because there's recording costs. You've got to execute a new mortgage or a confirmatory mortgage. You might have to have a confirmatory deed. I'm going to have to do a 5B affidavit. Like, it's a really big deal when you get it wrong. And I think for most people, they're looking at it, well, it's a house. Like, what's the big deal? It's a house. Whereas us attorneys, we're looking at it, we're like, well, it's the land, and it's all the people that potentially have right to that land, which is, again,
Okay,
comes
thanks,
back.
Carla. I have to jump off. Thank
you,
you.
Jim. It was great seeing you.
Okay, bye-bye.
But that's where I think a lot of times when people are like, I don't understand why title's taking so long to get back, or it's been in the same family for a long time, or. There's so many different ways that we have to look at how the land itself has been encumbered, from a divorce, from a probate, from a death, from a mortgage, from a changing lot lines, from a, there's a lot of different things that we have to look at. So, even drafting those purchase and sale agreements, having to say like that the buyer understands that the lot lines are going to change, and trying to carve out with the other attorney what is going to be acceptable for, timelines, and are the buyers were under the impression for some reason that they were going to be able to approve the lot lines before they were approved. And, she was like, well, where are the preliminaries? And I was like, oh, no. We're not getting another hand in the pot here. Like, the surveyor's doing their work with the sellers. We're submitting to the town. And when we come back, we're going to show you what it is. What we're telling you is that you will have a conforming lot, because right now they're non-conforming. And what we're telling you, which is a better type of lot, because you're never going to have to get a variance or anything else like that when you go to buy or when you go to build. So it's great that you're getting a conforming lot. We're also telling you that the lot will not be smaller than the square footage than it is now. We're promising you that. So you will not have less land or anything else like that. But again, it's really even ordering appraisals or anything else like that, because the appraiser can't go appraise what is there now, because of what they're appraising. Granted, the house will still be there, but the land itself will be different in the appraisal, because we're switching lot lines. So there's a lot of moving parts. And so, these are just some of the ways that the purchase and sale agreement really comes in. So even in some of the cleanest deals, what I tell people when I review purchase and sale agreements with them, when I do my intake with buyers and sellers, I say, listen, you hired an attorney for a reason. It's my job to do all, the boring reading and, everything else like that. At the same time, it's your life, your money, your future. You have a right to know what you're signing. And if you want to know what you're signing, we can go over those 50 to 70, sometimes even more clauses together. The big thing is, though, is that we're really only looking at 10 to 15 clauses, maybe, like at most. I mean, it's names, it's dates, it's amounts, it's included, it's excluded, and then anything else. Is there an appraisal contingency that was specifically delineated in the purchase, in the offer to purchase? Is there a home sale or home purchase contingency? Is there, so there could be some other things. Is it Title V that we're waiting for a Title V certificate? So a lot of the document, though, is actually stating the seller does this or the buyer doesn't have to buy, or the seller has to do this and has X amount of time past the closing date to fix it. The seller only has to spend X amount to do this. Or there's just a lot of language in there that if a condition happens, a condition precedent happens, then this clause of the purchase and sale agreement rises up and says, oh, okay, we're now there. So rather than waiting for something to happen and then the parties having to go back and negotiate, how are we going to handle this? It's already in there. If a title issue comes up, the Real Estate Bar Association, the REBA standards are how we clear it up. If this comes up, the seller only has to spend 1/2 of the sale price in order to clear title, except for voluntary liens like clearing mortgages or outstanding taxes or anything else like that. If the buyer or the seller is married and it was their primary residence, the seller has to release homestead rights. Well, people will be like, I'm not married. Well, guess what? I've had it before that the people thought they were divorced only to find out that they weren't divorced because someone never did one thing that was a condition of finalizing the divorce. Or what if you get married before you sell, but you're not married at the moment? So a lot of times people are like, well, this doesn't apply to me. Why is it in there? And it's like, well, it may come up. And if it doesn't come up, it's a moot point. Who cares? But if it does come up, then we've already got language that we've determined on how we're going to handle it, and we don't have to go fight about it or try to negotiate it, at a later time. So actually, a lot of the purchase and sale agreement is almost like dormant language until you need it. And it's just not covered in the standard form purchase and sale agreement. And that's the reason that, buyers have riders and sellers have riders. And, because we're trying to make sure that we are further fleshing out the rules of engagement almost. And that's why I say that, these documents, I rely on them all the time. And I even on my spreadsheet, I have the day that the deal came in, the name, is it a buy or a sell? When's the P&S due? Do I have a draft? Have edits come back? Who's the attorney? What's the mortgage contingency date? What's the sale date? Who's the agent? Who's the loan? Like I have all of this on a spreadsheet. I'll even have a column about appraisal. Is there appraisal language? So if someone comes back to me and goes, property didn't appraise. Well, if the appraisal was waived, I can just look at my spreadsheet and be like, tough. Oh, well, who cares? They still have to buy. So, it's trying to not recreate the wheel every time, but making sure that we're covering as much as we possibly can to mutually protect our clients. And, maybe I get a little bit too zealous about it, but I tell people that there's never just to stand on principle do I negotiate purchase and sale agreements. I had a deal that's active. I mean, we signed P&S, but when I put in my permit language, it says seller to the best of the seller's knowledge, pulled all permits required by the town or city in which the premises is located and is not aware of any open permits. Seller's attorney came back to me and said, yep, attic and basement were finished with absolutely no permits. What do you want to do about it? Okay, well, this was good to know. I wasn't killing the deal over it. It wasn't my decision to kill the deal. I went to my clients and said, hey, here's the deal. And they said, well, we knew the kitchen might have to come out when they did the smoke inspection, but what about the bathroom? I said, listen, there's illegal bathrooms and basements all over Massachusetts. I said, but I can't promise you that the town won't make you rip it out. I said, this is what I would do. I would anonymously call and I would state, hey, I said I would maybe call twice, maybe one time the husband and one time the wife. One time say, hey, we're looking in this town. If we found a house that we wanted to put a bathroom in, what would it take to put a bathroom in? Because if the town was like, we absolutely do not allow bathrooms in the basement, well, then we know that if they find out about this, they might make you rip it out. Usually, they'll say, oh, this is the permitting or whatever else like that. Then the other one could have called anonymously and been, don't give the name of you don't want to put your house that you're potentially buying on the town's radar, but just call up and say, hey, so if I was looking for permits and I didn't see a permit for a bathroom in the basement, what could, and I bought a house, what could be the consequence? So, I just told them, I said, you need to find out what your risk analysis is. I can't make that determination for you. I would buy an illegal bathroom in a basement all day long. As many bathrooms as I could have in my house. If you told me it was a 2-bedroom, 6-bath, I'd be thrilled. Give me as many bathrooms as possible. But knowing that there's probably an illegal bathroom. The good thing is that usually, I've really never heard it a different way, and one day I will, and then I'll have to retract these statements, is that a buyer who buys a house that had illegal work done to it is never treated as harshly as the homeowner who did it, because they realize they're not the ones that did it. So if a homeowner did it and the town gets whiff of it, they can come back, they can charge you triple the amount of the permit. They can either make you completely tear it out or really make it unpleasant. So friends of mine decided in a nice town to finish off a 1,600 square foot basement and not pull a permit. I have absolutely no idea. It had nothing to do with the money. I have no idea why they didn't do it. But their contractor said, you don't need a permit. It's no big deal. No one ever gets permits for finished basements. So they said, okay. Well, down the street, a neighbor was doing a basement. And so when the building inspector went to, do one of the rough inspections, he's driving down, and my friends had put a portalet outside the house because it was during COVID and they didn't want the contractors in their own house. So they put a portalet outside. So building inspector rolls up, doesn't have like a branded shirt on or anything, and trots down the basement stairs and goes, hey, what's going on around here? And contractor's like, oh, basement, blah, 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 blah. Which trade are you with? What can we help you with? And the guy's like looking at his book going, I don't see any permits on this. They had already put up, all the electrical was done, all the lighting was done, all the blue board was up, all the tape was done. They were ready to paint and start finishing it. Building inspector make them rip everything down. Everything, made them rip out everything to the tune of over $20,000 of like blue board and electrical and lighting and everything else like that. And then they charged them triple the permit fee because they want to make an example of these people. If you're the buyer that buys this house and you maybe didn't know, would potentially, I just don't see the building department coming in randomly and being like, you've got to start opening walls. The problem becomes is that, let's say you're like, okay, well, we want to add a couple more outlets and we want to do the right thing and we're going to pull a permit. And then the electrical inspector goes, well, none of this work was ever permitted. So for you to do these outlets, you have to bring all of this up to today's code, which code is a funny thing. It's a big stickler for me with home inspectors when they say it's not up to code. Well, you only need to be up to code if you were up to code when you did the work. So technically code right now is all of your outlets should be, or all of your breakers should be arc vault. But that's only been within the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. So if your house was built in 2001, you wouldn't have arc fault breakers, and it's not out of code. If you went to do something today to it, they might make you bring it up to code. But, inspectors say a lot of times it's not up to code, and it really is something that frustrates me because buyers hear that. And out of everything that the home inspector says, I feel like it's the one thing that they can always say, and they'll come back to me and they'll be like, well, this, and this needs to be fixed because it's not up to code. I'm like, code for what? Because guess what? When you deal with one of those houses that was built, my house isn't up to code. I was built in 1920. It has knob and tube wiring, it has lead paint, and it has vermiculite in the walls. That's not up to code, but I didn't do anything to the house, so they can't come in and say, oh, it's not up to 2021 code. So, it's, I got a little off tangent when I started talking about the purchase and sale agreement, but that's kind of like, one of those things that I'm not going to stop anyone from buying a house that doesn't have permits, but I do need to educate my client as to what the potential ramifications could be. And then they need to decide on their own. Is that a deal breaker for you or isn't it? I had a deal the other day that it was advertised as a 2-bedroom. Building field card said it was a 1-bedroom. Seller inside kept saying, it's not a big deal. This has been sold multiple times as a 2-bedroom. And I said, well, that's all good and fine, but the appraiser is not going to appraise it as a 2-bedroom. And technically my buyer should not turn around and sell it as a 2-bedroom because it's not a 2-bedroom. And so, and again, I told my client, I said, listen, it's in the city. It's 2 bedrooms. They took the living room, they made it into a bedroom. If you're happy with that, I'm happy with that. I don't care. Not my house. If you think that's going to be a problem for you, or you turn around and you try to sell it and you can only sell it as a 1 bedroom and you don't think that you're going to be able to like keep the value of it, that's the risk analysis that you have to take. I'm never here to kill a deal, but I do have to educate my clients, and I have to make sure that I'm educating them in a way that, not for nothing, guys, that I don't turn around and get sued because I didn't explain it correctly. Because guess what? The first person that gets sued in every transaction is us, because we're the attorneys. We somehow needed to be the number one adult in the room. And so, every once in a while, there is a certain element of us attorneys that we come and we do a CYA because we understand that everybody's like moving fast and like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And I'm seeing a lot of buyers coming back to their agents and or attorneys. And this is the first time I've seen it a lot more with the agents saying, I waived my inspection, and now that I've lived in the house, this, and this. And had I not waived my inspection, I would have known about this. And you told me I had to waive my inspection. I don't believe that most agents say you have to waive your inspection. They're saying if you want your offer to be considered, I would advise you to waive your inspection. But again, on a completely different tangent, you guys need to be documenting this. You need to be putting it in an email, or you need to be putting it in your initial conversation with them. That's basically like, here's the rules of engagement. Here's the way that you can make your offer more attractive by not having a home sale contingency, by not having an appraisal contingency, by not having a mortgage contingency, by not having an inspection contingency. Those things will make your offer more attractive. Now, let me tell you what each one of the, by waiving any of those things, what each one of those waiving sets you up for. What does it expose you to? That's the thing that I think is not, I'm not saying that the agents aren't being clear, the buyers aren't processing. Because when I do my intake and I say, okay, well, you waived your home, sale contingency or whatever else. And then my client's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, no, you did. And they're like, well, I have to sell in order to buy. I'm like, well, that's not what the offer says. And then I talk to the agent, and the agent goes, well, their offer wouldn't have been accepted if I had put that in there. It's still a fact. Can't get around it. Or, when I actually explain to a buyer, it says you waived your appraisal contingency. So you understand that if the house appraises for $20,000 less than the sale price, you have to bring an extra $20,000 to the table, right? And they're like, what? I don't have that money. I can't do that. And so these are the conversations that, I feel like we hit a brick wall. I get the offer. I talk to my client and realize that not only was there maybe not a meeting of the minds between the buyer and the seller, there didn't seem to be a meeting of the minds as to what the buyer or seller thought that they were agreeing to in the offer in terms of what their own risk or exposure was. So if at any time you guys are ready to submit an offer, or you want to know how you should word something, or you want your client to have a quick 411 and by all means, I'm here for you guys. Put my phone number in your phone. I'm more than happy to take a call and, make sure that everything is going to not get jammed up, because this is what's happening a lot. I come into the PNS and I go, hey, everybody, so there wasn't a meeting of the minds. And then the selling side goes, well, we had 7 other offers. So if you don't want to just accept it, then we're going to move on to the next one. And then the buyer is so upset going, wait, what do you mean? I'm going to lose my house, but wait. And I'm like, I usually only have 2 options for you. There's maybe an option 3, but I don't have an option, hidden behind my back, option number 4. So a lot of times I'm limited, take it or leave it. Like, leave it or take it. Those are your options, just because of how the market is. And I don't necessarily know that that's, fair or right, but a lot of times right now that is what it is. So I got off on a couple other different things. What questions, because I know we've been here an hour now, what questions do you guys have for me, if anything? Nada.
You talked about something in the title about love and consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So I had someone approach me. Oh God, I can't remember how long ago it was. And somebody in their family was selling, I think it was like a father was selling a piece of property.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought they were going to be the recipient of the property should he pass away.
Mm-hmm.
And when they started doing digging, they saw that there was in the registry of deeds for love and consideration to the stepwife. Yes. So their stepmother. even though that they thought that they were going to be getting this property, and now they're getting nothing.
Yeah.
And they decided, I said, talk to an attorney.
Mhm.
And then they decided that it wasn't going to be worth the aggravation or the time and effort. I'm like, well, you should do it, but that's
Yeah, so we don't use love and consideration anymore, and I don't even know if the registries will allow it anymore. So
I think this was purchased in either the late 80s or
I
early
was going to
90s.
say it hasn't been used for 20 years, you know, but that's the sweet spot of when love and consideration, it was, you know, because you have to have consideration to have a conforming deed. You have to have consideration. So we would say in love and consideration, you know. Then we started doing a nominal fee of $1, which that dollar never exchanges hands. And then the trend now is $100, but again, never exchanges hands. Yeah, that's a big one. I was doing a class with Will's Estates Trust, like probate attorney, and we were talking a lot about that. Is that, you know, people will see themselves listed in a will and they're super excited,
Right.
only to find out that all the property that's owned by the person that passed away has been deeded to other people.
Mhm.
So, and a will does not supersede a recorded deed.
Right.
And that the beneficiaries of all the life insurance and everything else like that were all these other people. And a will does not supersede if you have a named beneficiary. So these children who thought they were getting all this stuff ended up basically getting screwed out of their inheritance completely, because all the property and all the life insurance went to all these other people. So basically
Right.
it ended up being like personal property.
Yep.
You know, so if there was a Rolex or a Porsche or something, maybe they got something. But if there was no real, you know, money or safety deposit box or bank accounts or anything, then, you know, there was nothing left to get.
Mhm.
So yeah, that whole, you know, deed thing. And then there's the other one that, you know, in law school you say it's like, you know, okay, Steve, you know, this house is going to be yours. I've signed it over to you, but I'm going to put that deed in this desk drawer over here. It was never accepted. You never accepted it. And it was so you would have to prove that there was an intention of, let's say, grandma giving you that house, and somehow grandma thought that the deed got recorded and it didn't. But by saying it, I have it here for you, I'm putting it over here, it was a future, it was a promise for the future, but it wasn't an actual act.
Right.
So, you know, it would be, the question then could also become, you know, at what point, you know, was the father, you know, was he of sound mind? Was there, you know, duress or coercion to get him to sign the deed over, you know? But if it was back in the 80s, chances are he was of sound mind and everything else like that, and maybe he meant to. But here's the thing: even if after he gave it to stepmom, dad lost all power when he gave away the deed, so stepmom would have had to have agreed to convey it to the kids.
Right. And I think in this case, everything that the surviving children thought they were getting from their father, when he married the woman and signed the deed off to her, I think everything that they thought they were getting ended up going to her children.
Right. Well, this happened. My husband and I recently did our estate plan, and there was a lot of like the attorney would say it and I'd be like, oh God, I never really like thought about that, you know, because it was very clear of like, this gets to go to, because my husband has a child that's not biologically mine. It's like, this goes to our son. But if it doesn't go to our son, then it's reverting back to my family. So it's not going to like, so it goes to his son, and if his son has kids and he predeceased, then they go to him. But it wasn't going to end up going to like his parents or his mother or anything else like that, because it's our mutual property that I'm more than happy to give to my stepson, but I'm not going to give to his family. So we carved it out that it was like, okay, it goes to him and his heirs, but if he is deceased with no heirs, and it was also because my husband has a family home that has been in his family since the 40s. We also made sure that we set up certain things. They're not spendthrift funds. I can't think of what they're called, but that it was, he doesn't actually get title to it. And we set it up in a way that if he ever got married and divorced, the wife could never take the house. Same with, we have it set up that if him and I were to get divorced, I could never take the house from him. And I have a piece of property that we also set up that if we ever got divorced, he couldn't take that piece of property from me. Because although we owned it previously, they're now both considered marital assets. So, you know, setting up your estate plan so that your property, everything, you know, be it your watch, be it your house, be it anything, goes to who you think it's going to go to. It's really, I mean, we spent 3 hours there and we only have one kid, you know, like, but just 3 hours. And it was like, okay, well, and if this person dies first, then what's going to happen here? And he didn't want, and then, you know, my husband was like, well, I don't want you to not be able to use the lake house. So let's make it sure that you get it for your life. Then after that, it goes here, and then it would go here. And, you know, and then it was like, well, if this person's already passed away, then maybe my nephews start to take a little bit in it. But, you know, there's a lot to it, and it's exhausting.
Mhm.
Just getting all the documents together, and it's like, where are all your life insurance? Where's your disability? Where's your bank accounts? Where's your mortgages? Where, you know, it was truly exhausting to do. But at the same time, now it's like I don't even have to think about it. Like, you know, we did the healthcare proxies. We, you know, and we've been married for a long time, and we had never done it. It was just one of those things because I was like, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. But especially during COVID, I think a lot more people thought, ooh, things could change in a heartbeat.
Sure.
So if you guys don't have an estate plan, I would really, really, really highly recommend getting something. Because here's what I tell people about estate plans. First of all, the joke is pay now or pay later. You either pay for the estate plan now, or you pay for the probate attorney to do it later. One of the two. You do your estate plan now, you get to decide what happens to your property and everything. You don't do an estate plan, the court in the state gets to decide what happens to your property and what they think your wishes would have been. So one way or another, you know, you're not escaping death or taxes. Like, you're not escaping this. And it's very sad, I think, for a lot of people to talk about this, especially if you have children and you're trying to figure out, like, who are the kids going to go to? And, you know, you guys don't agree. The great thing about choosing where your kids go is, first of all, you both have to pass away. And second of all, if you both pass away, you know, it's the second, like, so you could have different things. Like, if we had a child, I could say, nope, it's going to my sister. And he could say, nope, it's going to my sister. So if I passed away, it's still my husband. And then if he passes away, it would go to his sister. If my husband passed away, it would go to me. And then it would go to my sister. So, you know, there's a lot. I mean, it's sad to think about, but at the same time, again, I have a sibling I wouldn't want my children to go to. Not for nothing. She's lovely, but I wouldn't want her husband raising my children. So, you know, it's, I think they're very important conversations to have and to get in front of it. So completely switching gears, PSA, get your estate plan together. So we're well past time. We're at 3:25. Any other questions?
This is perfect as always. Thank you so much, Carla.
Very sweet. Okay, you guys, well, have a great day. It was great seeing you all. I can't wait to see you in person.
Do you want to stay on for just me or?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Carla. It was great. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you so
bye-bye.
much.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, Carla. Nice meeting you.
Nice. Nikisha,
Nikesha, yes.
have a great one.
Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I'm leaving too.
Bye, Dawn.
Bye.
So I see a email from Joel that says the appraisal is in for review and acceptance at $240, which is $100 more than the accepted offer.
Okay. What do we got? Okay. Sounds great. Awesome. Fantastic. So that's good. We like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really, I mean, like I said, we are more than happy to close on the 21st.
I think it was.
Was that what it was?
That's what I think.
Versus the 30th. I'm totally happy to do it.
First, 21st.
And I never want to seem like I'm throwing Joel under the bus. Like, that's why I keep saying, like, he's working hard and, you know, like,
Yeah, well, he is, but he keeps going back at the management company trying to get them to get that second required signature, and they're going back to him saying, why?
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know if I should pipe in and say what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, maybe you could say, hey, Joel, could you give an you know, maybe he has, I don't know. I wasn't on those emails, but, you know, was it Jim who was saying it's maybe because of the first phasing and then
Right. Yep.
Yeah. You know, like,
because this was built in, God, I think it was 90 something.
I can tell you, I have the P&S right here.
Oh, year built 2006. But yeah, I'll reach out to Joel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, happy to assist in any way that I can.
Okay.
How's everything else? Pollen's almost gone. Oh my God, you will laugh at this. So I got my car washed yesterday morning. This is the first time in my life I've had a black car, and it's kind of driving me crazy.
You have a black car now?
I do. I've always had like silver or goldish or, something that.
Yeah, before this one, it was silver for me.
Yeah, and you just can't see don't see as much. So
it was as dirty as it was. It was always, it looked clean.
Yeah, or enough, So I went and got my car washed yesterday, and I went into UPS today, and I was parallel parked, and I went up to the first car that was black with black rims and everything, and on the back it was just covered in pollen. I'm like, son of a bitch! And then I tried to get in, and I was like, oh, that's not my car. And then I walked up to mine. I was like, oh, much better. Like someone's gonna think I'm trying to break into the car.
Someday I'd like to just talk to you about my property.
Sure. Are you out and about? Should we grab a lunch or a cocktail or something?
Oh, sure.
Send me some dates. I think this
because
shaping up okay.
our property,
Mm-hmm.
I have a common driveway.
Okay.
And like you were talking about, like I live on a non-conforming lot. I only own 40 feet of frontage on my road.
Mm-hmm.
And then I share my driveway with a second home. Mm-hmm. So I thought. And then doing digging, I realized that one of the properties that we drive by to get our properties, to get to our property, has something in the deed that says that they have the right, there's an easement for a right of way for a driveway as described in the town of Pembroke. I think that's the exact word. But they've never used it. And then whenever they, like if their kids are on our driveway, I'm like, oh, no.
Right.
I'm always afraid of like a lawsuit, but.
Well, but a lot of times those driveway easements, it's the right to pass and repass, depending on what part of the driveway it is. And then at a certain port, you might be able to park. But yeah, the pass and repass, it's like, it's a big one. And listen, I get it. When I wish the world was still like, oh, kids are being kids. Oh, you fell and you broke your arm. Oh, but doesn't that suck for you? Not like there was a rock in the driveway and I'm now suing you because my kid, it's like, that's the problem is that like, I would love it to be back in the day where, well, shame on you, Billy, but that's not where we are anymore.
I mean, mine, it also has an easement for Brockton Edison Company, which probably.
Yeah, so that's light.
Yeah, that's an electrical easement. Yeah.
So that's not a big deal. Yeah, if you want, before we meet up, if you send me like, the address and the addresses that I think I should be looking at for the different.
Right. Well, what I find odd is that I think when I looked, that language isn't on my deed. It's on the other property that I share the driveway with. It's on their deed and the property that abuts their property on their deed. But for them to access, so I'll say I'm property A, and the person that I share my driveway with is B, and then you have C in the front. For C to cross to get to their property would have to cross mine, but there's no language on my deed.
But it could be in the title search because so it used to be that everything was recited in the deed, everything. Same with those condo deeds. Some, the old condo deeds, the first deed out, you had to put everything in there. They were like 4 pages long. The trend started to become that all it says is, and all easements, restrictions of right of way that are still in full force and effect. So rather than reciting everything, they just say full force and effect. And then during your title search, you start finding, oh, there's this easement. Oh, wait, there's this easement.
So can an easement be, can you change an easement? Can you, like if no one used that easement over a certain period of time, does that, because of non-usage, go away?
So there's 7 types of easements, and don't make me even pretend that I remember what all of them are. There's easement by prescription, there's easement in fact, so some easements is, okay, let's say that you had, like you said, A, B, and then C. And let's say the only way that you could reach C was through this easement. But then
they can't. They have their own driveway too. So
let's say hypothetically, I'm like an easement could go away. So one easement that it could go away is you've got A, B, and C in the back, and the only way for C to be able C to get to their property is to pass over yours. So
Right.
it would be an easement of necessity. So like the only way. But
Yeah.
let's say that where C's property is used to be all conservation land, and then all of a sudden the town says, you know what, we're not going to have conservation land. We're going to go ahead. We're going to put a road here.
Right.
Well, now all of a sudden C can access their property from the back of the lot versus
Mhm.
A and B. So this
Right.
easement, they now have another access. So this easement could be dissolved because it's not an easement by necessity anymore.
Got you.
Same with some easements can be just easements like during someone's life. Some easements can be like I'm dealing right now with something in Brockton that the pool was put in the middle of two lots, and we're trying to determine, are we moving the pool, or is the neighbor going to give a temporary easement that basically says, as long as this pool's here, you have an easement to have the pool on my lot. But the minute that this pool isn't there, you can't put a new pool in. Like, so like I said, there's 7 different types of easements. There's easements in gross, there's reciprocal easements. I don't remember what they all are, but it depends.
It says here, the deed is given subject to, and I can't, it's like, it has unofficial copy, reserving? No, I don't know what that is. For the use of the grantor, his assignees and or successors, a 10-foot wide easement bordering the northerly boundary of the access portion of Lot 7 for the purpose of installing and maintaining a water service and a driveway as commonly used in the town of Pembroke. But they already have a driveway that they've been using since 1970, whatever.
Yeah, so we probably have to go, there must have been a reason at some point. Like, did they always have that driveway?
They've always had the driveway that they use since 1970 something.
But before that, it was the house that, you know, I'm wondering if it is one of those, it's no longer an easement of necessity, and you guys could. So yes, you asked me, can easements go away? Yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes, like, let's say my house abutted a lake and you were across the street. Well, I could grant you an easement. I could say,
I've seen that.
For the life of Steve LeBlanc.
Yeah.
You know, he has a 10-foot path to pass and repass to access Lake Winnipesaukee.
That's funny. I've seen that.
Yeah, so you could do that. Now the question becomes: is it for Steve and his heirs? Like, so let's say that you sell the house to your son, or is it only for your life? Because if it's just for your life, well, the minute that you pass or you sell the house, you know, sometimes you'll say, you know, for this life of Steve and his heirs, for so long as they own the property located at da 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 da. So if you move to someplace else, you don't get to still come to my land and cross over. And
Correct.
When you sell the property, your buyer needs to know you don't have access to that lake. Only I have access to that lake.
Because this came up because the owners that I share my driveway with wanted to put up either a fence or arborvitaes to block. There's an opening, a space to open. That's an open space there to block their. I don't want to say to block their access, just to block the view of their property. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know, we'd have to go back and look at what was the intent of it originally. Why was it ever created? And then the argument is it still necessary? And there can also be, and I don't remember exactly what the law is with it, but you can abandon an easement. And there has to be a certain amount of time that someone doesn't use the easement. I don't remember if it's 20 years. I don't remember if it's 30 years. That if you don't use it and it wasn't an easement of necessity, that you could go argue, well, you abandoned it, so therefore you clearly don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
So, you know, it would all be pulling all the puzzle pieces and then trying to figure out, why did it come about? Why is it still there? Can it be dissolved? And then the next question is, what does it take to be dissolved? Because if it's really, you know, it becomes one of those things that, you know, the neighbor now says, well, I don't care that I've never used it, I still want it. Then
right.
You might have to take it to land court to argue to get this easement dissolved. And then it's like, you know, if it's a $10,000 legal fee, like, is that something that you, you know, want? Right. Because they might say, well, to dissolve the easement, we need 3 surveys of the 3 properties to determine bound. Like, I have no idea. It's like,
and
that's
then
not
in the end, I still have to live here and we're still neighbors.
Exactly. Right. So.
And we've been here 26 years. My new neighbor's been here since November that I share my driveway with. And then the neighbor that thinks that I always tell them that they think they have an easement, but they don't, but technically I guess they do. They've been there 8 or 10.
Well, the next question becomes, if the new neighbor just goes and puts the fence up or the arborvitae's and the other owners, lot C or whatever we're saying it was,
Yep.
never says anything. Like, how long before you can argue that no, you know what, you never said anything. It doesn't become adverse possession. It's not that, but it's a way to argue that clearly you didn't need this easement. You never said anything about it. You haven't used it. So therefore, and again, the question becomes, does it just become shut up money?
Right.
Here's a couple $1,000s. You don't need this.
Right.
Get over yourself. Or are you really going to go fight me in court over it?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
It's just something that's always bothered me.
Right now,
Once I found out. Right, because now, we're getting to the point where I think it's the original driveway from 1972. It's getting time to replace it.
Right.
And if 2 homeowners are splitting the cost to replace the common area, the common driveway, and then the third one decides, oh, look, I'm going to start using this driveway.
Right, and that's the problem is that, when you have, when you give an easement, the person giving the easement is the one that's required to maintain the easement. So, right, so you're improving a driveway that someone that's going to get to use it doesn't have to put 1 penny into it.
Right. All right.
Good stuff.
It is fun. It's stuff that I think about when it comes up in other things that you're looking at. You're like, oh, I wonder what's going on with my driveway. And then you look and you're like, oh.
And it's so funny, see, because the attorney I met with last night, did you ever use Nicole Cox?
No.
Yeah, so she was a solo. She did it for like 20 some years. She's my age, but she was one of those people, like the minute she got out of college, she went straight to law school. And she just became title counsel for Caddick, one of the title companies. And so, we went out to the Red Sox game and you were talking and, because I was always asking, I was like, how do you do this by yourself? Like, I don't understand. And she just told me, she was like, I couldn't do it anymore. She's like, I couldn't every single day of every single minute have to, like, she was like, there was no time off. There's never a weekend. There's never a minute to yourself. And I was like, I know, like, I'm the idiot who's like, call me. I'm like, why do I want more phone calls?
And now more than ever, we're connected. Yeah. We can't say office hours are till 5 o'clock Friday. Now we can do this, what we're doing now.
Right. And, and it's just, it's amazing because it's like, as much as like, I know more than the average, agent or anything else like that about title, the title stuff goes so deep. It is just a rabbit hole that just goes and goes and goes. And every time you think you're like, okay, I got a handle on it. And then something comes in from like outer space and you're like, what the? And I have one going on right now that it was like, even the title companies are all like, we're not 100%, like all of them. Like, that's why they're going back and forth. Cause like one title company was like, oh, well, once they used this reserved power in the deed, it extinguished. It was a one-shot deal. And then the other 2 title companies were like, where's the case law on that? And then then the title company came back and said, well, we don't have any case law, but it can't possibly be, and in all, like all of them came forward and were like, we very rarely see these reserved powers. And even fewer times do we see them actually utilized. So they're all kind of like trying to agree and almost like not make case law because it's not in a court of law, but almost trying to decide like, okay, us 3 title companies, like, how are we all going to agree to handle this? And it's been like quite the like hoop jumping and everything else like that. And I was like, and I'm just looking at it. I mean, the way I read it, I was like, they reserved powers right here. They can go do whatever they want, and then, but all 3 title companies are kind of like, well, yes, but maybe not. And maybe, and I'm like, well, shit. I mean, and we're trying to get rid of the property. So we're like, we don't care, but from the very beginning, it was one of those things. I went and looked at the deed when I was drafting the P&S agreement. And I was like, I looked at the deed and I was like, we have a problem here.
And are we still recording?
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.